He's a retired police officer. He was shot in the face during a foot pursuit, almost claimed his life. He's got lifelong injuries, but he tried to go back to police work. Notice I said he tried. He's now a podcaster. He's here to tell us all about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. If you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for at LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, at LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Joining us from Illinois, we have Dominic Thielmann on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Dominic is retired Romeoville Police Department, which is in Illinois, police officer, and he's a podcaster. It's called Beyond the Dispatch Podcast. He's one of the founders of the show. Just do a Google search for Beyond the Dispatch Podcast, and you will find it. And before we get into the interview itself, Dominic, I got to tell you, I'm sure you've heard this, and I know it's not falling on deaf ears. The fact that I have a conversation with you in light of what you went through physically is a miracle. You're alive and breathing and talking.
Yeah, I definitely have some guardian angels looking over me for sure.
And if those who don't know, Dominic was, and you wouldn't know, Dominic was shot in the face during a foot pursuit. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. It turns out I'm not very good at dodging bullets.
By the way, none of us tend to be. I used to think I had superhuman strength. I used to think back in the day, that I was in 4 shootings in a little more than 10 years. And the first 2 I never fired a shot back. The last 2 were different affairs. Everybody survived, thank God. But I used to think to myself, Dominic, the bad stuff only happened to other people. It never happened to me because I was just that good.
Right.
Turns out
I was that good.
Turns out I'm not that good. I don't know why I survived and other people didn't. Some of those people that didn't were phenomenal police and phenomenal people. And I don't know to this day why they didn't make it and I did.
Yeah, brother. I would say, God has a plan for sure.
And apparently he has a plan for you.
Yes, God willing, from your lips to God's ears, hopefully, I'm on the new chapter of my life, and it's going to be, 2025 is going to be my year.
And before we get into your story of what happened, isn't it true, or is it true, that you talked to your doctor after the surgeries, after all that stuff, about returning to police work?
Yeah, so the next morning when I woke up and everyone came to see me, I always would tell my chief or anyone that would ask, I'm coming back. I'm determined that I will be back.
And it wasn't in the cards for you, just like it wasn't for me.
Right, exactly. So I had to come to terms with that, speak with my wife, my family. It was definitely hard. It was heartbreaking for sure.
How old were you when you retired or were forced in retirement?
So currently, I'm still at the end process of my medical retirement. My shooting happened about 2 years ago, so I was 32 at the time, and I just turned 34.
Here's the reason why I asked that, Dominic. And by the way, I was 32 going on 33 when I retired. And I got hurt, and I thought it was just a sprained wrist. I didn't think it was a big deal. I wound up having 3 surgeries, 2 steel plates put in, and they retired me. So my right hand, I'm right-handed. And I have very limited movement in their right hand. A lot of things are fused and placed. But when I was confronted with, now what do you do? That was kind of a big burden for me because I didn't know what to do.
Right. Yeah. It's scary in a sense. I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm sure you felt very similar. To me, it's, what's my next steps? Where do I go? How do I provide, continue to provide for my family?
Right. Another part was identity. And I'm not saying this is a negative. A lot of people do. Police work became part of who I was. It wasn't just a job. It was a calling for me.
Yeah, I definitely feel similar. I always wanted to be the police. My dad was a military police officer, so I think that's where I got the bug from. But I always wanted to help people. I'm not a big desk guy, so sitting behind a desk drives me nuts.
Boring.
Agreed.
And that we used to call people that worked inside all the time house cats because they never left the building. And I was like, no, I don't want to be them. And we could go down this rabbit hole, but one of the things for me, and I tell people this all the time, when I was on the job, didn't matter how chaotic it was, didn't matter how traumatic it was, I knew what to do. I knew my job. I kind of flourished in that. It's when things got quiet and I didn't know what to do and I didn't know how to handle all this stuff. And I wanted to do 25 years minimum. I was thinking I would jokingly think that I'd be police commissioner someday of some department because I wanted to make a difference. And that was gone.
Yeah, taken away from you. And, you always have these dreams, aspirations, and, all that in law enforcement. And then, next thing, you get injured and it's all changing. And your whole outlook on life kind of changes and, you have to come up with a new plan. And no one really prepares you for that aspect of life.
Got to ask you this. When you were shot, and there's really no other pleasant way of saying this, and by the way, I hate being so abrupt to people, but they're like, man, this guy is rough. We were taught, like when we do death notifications, and I'm sure you had to do some of those during your career, you knock on the door, you find Mr. Brown, you tell Mr. Brown his son was killed in a car accident, and you just tell them the truth. So when you were shot, how long were you on the job?
7 years. Actually 6 years. I apologize. I was 6 years on. I was a detective before that, and then I moved to the gang unit. So we focused on guns, gangs, and drugs.
And there's a funny thing that happens when I don't say this as an insult, but you were not a rookie anymore. The first 2-3 years, maybe some people say 5 years, you're really learning to do the job. Beyond that, 6 to 10 is a sweet spot. 10 to 15, you're really good at what you do. And then 15 plus, you turn into that salty guy who doesn't want to do anything.
Right, yeah. So I would say, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything like that, but I had some decent training. I had some really good training. I was in the SWAT team at the time. Tactics were pretty squared away. I wouldn't say I was the best or anything, but definitely knew two or three things for sure, tactic wise. I was in investigations, so I was definitely a very well-rounded officer.
So you went into this, and we'll go into more details first. Can you tell us basically what happened? You started, and I believe it was a foot pursuit, and then there was gunplay.
Correct. So I'm not able to talk about the shooting, the case in itself, but I can give you a little snippet of what happened. So last thing I remember was sprinting down the sidewalk, and then everything went black. Then I kind of came to, and for anyone who ever's been in combat sports, wrestling, MMA, anything like that, jiu-jitsu, if you've ever been choked out, I kind of explain it like being choked out, like you're coming out of a dream state. When that happened, my right arm just was throbbing and on fire. And that's, I woke up and I was drowning in my own blood. My partner had located me. He ran up to me, started pulling me to safety. And I could remember feeling my service pistol being dragged out of my hand. I didn't have the strength to hold on to it. And I kept yelling, get my gun, get my gun. But what it came out was all gargled. So they didn't understand what I was saying. Once they got me to a safer location near the street, I was able to flip over, and I knew I was in bad shape because at that point, a bunch of blood just started pouring out of my mouth. I was able to clear my airway that way, so it gave me a little bit of some type of security in the sense, or at least that's what I grasped onto, that my airway is open. You go into survival mode. My partner, literally to this day, still credit him to saving my life.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break, and then when we return, we'll talk more with Dominic about the incident that ended his police career. I'll give you a hint. He was shot in the face during a foot pursuit. He can't talk a lot about it because it's still pending court procedures. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner. based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, has been in the hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at a gunrunnerfilm.com. Return to conversation with Dominic Thielmann. He's retired from the Romeoville Police Department in Illinois. He's a podcaster, Beyond the Dispatch podcast. And when I say he was retired, he retired young because he was shot in the face and suffered severe injuries, which we'll talk about in a few moments. I want people to understand this. It's still pending court litigation, so he can't talk a lot about the incident itself. So, Dominic, you were off the hook about that. But I got to ask you this question before we turn to conversation. I've had people on the show that have been shot and they lost consciousness, and some of them, especially with headshots, they don't remember at all. Some people say it's a blessing that they have no memory of the incident or even the initial stages of the injury. But were you aware of what happened?
Unfortunately, yeah. So I remember everything leading up to it. I remember everything afterwards until they brought me to the hospital. And
you said that, and it's kind of rang bells for me. You said if you've been in any combat sports and you get hit and you lose consciousness. So I remember you getting knocked out playing baseball and other things. And one of the things that happens when you come to, there's a disorientation phase where you're not really sure what's going on, but you hear this ringing in your ears. And some people get it really good in the movies. You lost consciousness and you came to, and you said that you felt extreme pain in one of your arms, and then you were bleeding to death, and your partner saved your life. Did you go through any of that slow realization of what just happened?
Yeah, I knew I was in bad shape when I woke up and I was unable to breathe. When my partner dragged me to safety, that's when I flipped over and cleared my airway, and I knew I had to get medical attention ASAP. Luckily, my partner jumped into action, and we weren't going to wait for an ambulance. He gave an order. Yeah, he called out to our other individual who was working with us that night to grab a vehicle because I had the squad keys to our squad, so he wasn't able to locate them. Luckily, Suanos jumped into action. He grabbed the Honda Civic, which is just a UC car, which is an undercover car for those that don't know. It didn't have any lights, sirens, or anything like that. It was just a stock vehicle. For those that don't know, I'm about 6'1". I was working out very heavily at that time, so I was about 240 pounds. My partner's about 6'3". He's also about 260, and just two massive gentlemen in the back seat of a Honda Civic is definitely not a place you want to be when one individual is also covered in blood. It was like a slip and slide in the back.
Yeah.
Once I was loaded in, I knew I was in bad shape, and the only thing that kind of clicked in my mind was keep breathing. You got to keep breathing. And then I kept thinking of my son. And I remember looking out the window, and I remember putting my hand up on the glass, and my hand slid down because it was just caked in blood. And I knew I was getting near the end.
And you were totally conscious when this is going on, so your mind is working even if you can't talk.
Right, correct. So I was in an extreme amount of pain. What turns out is the bullet had entered just below my chin under the soft part where your tongue is located, went through my throat, hit my hyoid bone. It hit and struck my C5, fracturing it, then severing my vertebral artery on the right side of my neck, and then striking my brachial plexus, which is the nerve bundle that controls your right arm, and exits out my back right shoulder. That's later on I found that out, and that's why I was unable to move my right arm. I also, when I fell, I didn't fall very gracefully. I fell face first into the concrete, cracking my skull in 3 different locations.
Dude, are you kidding me? I mean, you've been through, it's like you've been through a war in itself, just you.
Right. So I had blood, air in my brain. I was definitely going the rounds, and I felt like I was fighting Mike Tyson, and it was not going my way. So on the way to the hospital, my buddy started rendering me first aid. He had cut off my shirt, and then also started tending to my wounds, but he saw the exit wound on my right shoulder, but he didn't see an entrance. So he's kind of started panicking. I found that out later. He was cool as a cucumber. This guy kept me calm the whole time. Jimmy was phenomenal. He definitely kept me focused on keep breathing, keep focused. We're going to get you to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, we almost died about 2 or 3 times. We were hanging out. I was hanging out of the car at one point still because the door didn't close all the way. So my buddy was able to pull me in and get me secured that way. And then when we were driving to the hospital, we were trying to coordinate an escort with the officers that were responding to the shooting. We were able to get an officer in front of us. We were going through the intersection. We almost got T-boned by a semi-truck, which would have not been very good for us.
No.
And then on the way to the hospital, there's a certain turn in our town going to the next town to the hospital where if you take it too quickly, you'll just jettison off the road and into a pond. We almost did that. Luckily, Suanios is a solid driver and squared away, so we were able to make it to the hospital. We had called ahead of time to kind of prepare them for what was to come. When we pulled up into the ambulance bay, my partner jumped out of the car, ran around, opened the back door, and I fell face first into the ambulance bay. I always give him a hard time now telling him that he gave me a TBI and broke my skull, but it wasn't the case. Damage was done way ahead of time. At that point is when I actually spoke clearly, I think for maybe the first time. My partner asked me, he's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And I was just like, living the dream, Jimmy, just living the dream.
You're kidding me. That's what your response was?
That was my response. That's usually my always go-to response.
Dude, I turn around and say, "What's wrong with you?"
I'm not right in the head, brother. I'm not right in the head.
Look, police work will do that to you. If you started off great, you're not going to end that way. And you don't have to get shot in the face. Here's a question. At one point, did you ever think, and I know you said you had a son, you were married at the time, you're still a relatively young guy, in shape, and training was a big part of my thing back then too, and I got to get back in the gym. But it was a big part of what I did, and it helped me survive. But mental toughness, one of the things that we were taught in the academy, from day one, they just constantly drill this in your head. No matter how bad the fight is, no matter how bad you're losing, you stay in the fight. Don't give up. Don't quit.
Yes, sir. I couldn't say it better myself, and that's something I'm a big proponent of, is that warrior mindset. I think that warrior mindset saved my life with a bunch of other things that all came together that night and saved my life. But definitely that warrior mindset is what kept me breathing.
And you were still conscious in your thinking. Did you start thinking, "Oh, this might be the end for me? What am I going to do? What happens to my wife and kids?"
Truthfully, that didn't cross my mind. I didn't let myself get to that point. I just kept saying, breathe, just breathe. That's the only thing that I thought about. That's the only thing that kept me going, and picturing my son's face. So that's the only thing that kept me going.
That reminds me of a conversation I had with a good friend last night, and we talked about the gym. And I'm not knocking personal trainers. I'm going to say that right away. And it's great if you work out with a personal trainer, you go to spin class, you do whatever you do. That's great. And I asked him, I said, a big part of going to the gym for me was the mental thing, where I just focused on breathing and focused on doing the next repetition. That was meditative for me. And it's still, even years. Did you slow your mind down by choice of saying just breathe?
It's possible. It's definitely possible. I don't know if it was me working out and being in such great shape beforehand that did it, or if it was just my mindset. But I think the mind is definitely very powerful. That
might help. We're talking with Dominic Thielmann. He's retired from Romeoville Police Department in Illinois. He's a podcaster beyond the Dispatch podcast. He was shot in the face. We'll return to that conversation in just a few moments. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
From loneliness to a fulfilling, intimate relationship, Shot at Love, the book, offers insights, life lessons, and a lot of comedy. Get a copy of Shot at Love for all those looking for love and striking out. Written by Carrie Brett, a celebrity photographer and podcaster in Boston. This book will have readers crying, laughing, and learning what to do. Get it at shot@lovebook.com. It's shot@lovebook.com. That's shot@lovebook.com.
Are you turning 65 or stuck with a Medicare plan that just isn't cutting it? We make Medicare decisions and maximum coverage simple. Whether you're enrolling for the first time or looking for a better plan, our experts will help. Call 866-427-1225, 866-427-1225, 866-427-1225, or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
Return our conversation with Dominic Thielmann, retired from the Romeoville, Illinois Police Department, a police officer. He was shot in the face, almost died, tried to go back to police work, which we'll talk about later on, I promise you. He is now podcaster Beyond the Dispatch podcast is the name of his show. Just do a Google search for Beyond the Dispatch podcast, and you will find it as well. I can't help but thinking that the enormity of the situation that we almost didn't have this conversation. Because, listen, there are police that I knew that were shot, and they had headshots, and they didn't survive. Other ones that had headshots, we thought they were going to die and not make it, and they did survive. They were left blinded. They lost their sense of smell, all other things. But there's always, what's the word I'm looking for, Dominic? It's awe-inspiring that I can have this conversation with someone who, by all rights, probably shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I'm definitely lucky. I remember my wife and I speaking with the doctors afterwards, or she spoke with the doctor, and the doctor said I was probably about 20 minutes away from not making it.
That's pretty close. That's way. And by the way, I can't help but remember a conversation I had with two officers I worked with. This is before I got promoted to sergeant. And I made them promise that we had wagons back in the days, what we called them. And so when you had an arrest, you call for a wagon and come pick them up. You didn't put them in a patrol car, paddy wagon, whatever term people want to use. I always said, if I got shot and I'm going to die, do not let me die in the street. Do not let me die in the garbage. Put me in the back of a paddy wagon or whatever it's going to be.
Right. I agree with you 100%. I also had it's the same thought, brother. You know, that's the last place you want to spend your last moments.
Right. Another thing was I didn't think, and I don't know how to say this any other way, I never thought the bad stuff would happen to me until it did. And when it did, I always, my mind had a way of protecting itself. But if we really dwelled on all the bad stuff that could happen in modern day American policing, you'd never leave the station. You never got out of your car.
Right. And I feel like a lot of officers feel that way. I'm in a smaller town on the suburbs of Chicago, and you think to yourself, that's never going to happen to me. You know, you have that I'm bulletproof, I'm invincible mindset, and you got to train like you fight, and you got to keep pushing, and you can't be complacent, because complacency kills officers. It
does, and we had an old saying, complacency kills, and it kills all the time. And by the way, bad stuff shouldn't happen in a town called Romeoville. You don't think, oh, Romeoville sounds wonderful. It sounds like Romeo and Juliet. The stuff
right.
like this is not supposed to happen.
Right. And then I believe, unfortunately, I'm the first officer at Romeoville to be shot in the line of duty. I could be wrong, but I believe the chief told me that. And that's the one record I didn't want to hold. So. Yeah, no, look, I wouldn't want that either. And I'm busted up. I'm physically and emotionally busted up, but I'm okay with that. And one of the things that a lot of my guests on my show say is that, we're damaged goods, but we're okay with that. That doesn't mean we're worthless. Then we laugh, and we're okay with it. So we're going to move on to the next thing. You get to the hospital, then the whole surgical stuff goes on and the procedures for your prognosis for saving your life. What were you looking at? What did they do? Yeah, so the hospital staff, thank you to Bolingbroke Hospital. You guys were phenomenal. I couldn't thank you guys enough. Your actions definitely saved my life. You were able to stabilize me. When they wheeled me in, I just remember just trying to still focus on breathing. I was exhausted at that point in time. You're starting to go in and out of consciousness, and I just kept focusing on breathing, and I'm safe now. That's what I kept telling myself. They had me. I'm in good hands. I remember the last thing I remember was them yelling, "Get me O negative now." And all I kept thinking to myself was, oh crap, I'm O positive, but I was concussed at the time. So my thought process was a little blurred, and not knowing that O negative is definitely universal. So I just remember them putting a mask over my face and then just waking up the next day.
And there had to be a conversation with you, the doctor, and your wife at the time. Did they tell you then what it looked like, what your injuries were like, and what the prognosis was?
So they were definitely confused. They were originally thought that I was shot in the shoulder. They had no clue that I was actually shot in the face. So there was a lot of miscommunication. They were able to stabilize me and then airlift me to Loyola Hospital in Maywood. My wife didn't find out till later that night at about 1 o'clock when my brother and my commander went to the house to come and get her. She handled it like a rock star. She was definitely cool, calm, collective. She really got me through a lot of hard times in the hospital. She is an occupational therapist, so she was definitely familiar with brachial plexus injuries. That's definitely in her wheelhouse. So she was definitely a major resource for me mentally.
And then did they say that, like for mine, there was the first surgery, there's a possibility you can go back to police work. And then by the second, third one, the doctors, the lawyers all agree your career's over. This is what you've got to look forward to. Did you have that conversation with them?
So the stroke neurologist is the one that was able to determine that I was unable to return back to work. That I didn't find out about a year after my shooting. I had seen a doctor out of Northwestern by Dr. Coe. He's a plastic surgeon, but he specializes in brachial plexus injuries and nerve transfers. This gentleman was world-class, great bedside manner. He was, very calming, very just had an aura about him that puts you at ease, which I was, you want that when you're in a vulnerable state. It helped me mentally for sure. He walked me through the problems I was having with my brachial plexus. He came up with a game plan. And then I believe about 5 months later after my shooting, he was able to conduct a surgery, and he took the nerve that controls part of my tricep and he rewired it to my deltoid. After that, he just basically told me, go nuts. And I was in the mindset of, I refuse to be a victim. I'm not going to let this guy win. I'm not going to be woe's me. Everyone feels sorry for me. That's definitely was not my mentality. I took it as a personal challenge, and I literally just tried to beat myself up every single day in the gym for about 2 hours. Then I would go to physical therapy for an hour. Then I would go to OT for an hour, and I would do it all over again.
I'm sure you heard the term animal sometime in your career, and especially when you're recovering from this gunshot wound.
Oh, absolutely. I just kept driving. I just grinded it out, and I kept thinking that my right arm is going to be useless for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be able to throw a ball to my kid. I'm not going to be able to lift up my son again. And that, I think, really drove me to get my shoulder back to 100% as close as I can get it. And I'm still fighting to this day, and I refuse to stop.
So when we say, and there was a time, and I guess there's some similarities between you. My story is not as severe as yours. It's not as violent. It's bad enough. But the term animal I heard quite a bit. And some people say it is a compliment, and some people say it as a bit of an insult. But the truth was, I don't feel like I had any other choice but to do whatever I did. Did you feel like you had no choice in the matter?
I didn't give myself a choice. I didn't want to take that other road of just giving up. I came into this fighting. I've always been a fighter. I refuse to give up and succumb to it, because then, in a sense, the guy that shot me won, and that will never happen, and not in my mind.
I'm glad you said that. I made a post on, we're going to take a short break in just a moment. I made a post on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast Facebook page just a couple months ago. And it said, I've forgiven the people that shot at me, but I do not forget. I don't think I can. And as a matter of fact, I've been very blessed that I only remember one name of the 4 people that shot at me. And hopefully there'll come a day where I won't remember that name at all and they'll have zero power over my life today. We're talking with Dominic Thielmann. Dominic is retired Romeoville, Illinois Police Department officer. He was shot in the face. We're going to talk more about it in a moment. He's now a podcaster. The name of his podcast is called Beyond the Dispatch Podcast. Do a Google search for Beyond the Dispatch Podcast, and you will find it. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. The other day, I was walking my dog and walked by a house that's been for sale, and their asking price is only $18.7 million. Here's the thing. There are plenty of houses for $1.3, $5, $10, $20, $30 million for sale, and people are buying them. What do they know? They're not smarter than us. They're not more talented than us. They won't work harder than you. Maybe they know things like putting tools in place that can make you more profitable. If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can start it for free. letpops.com. Check it out today.
Remember when free meant free? No charge, no credit card information needed. Well, a place like that still exists on the internet. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show website, letradio.com. Where everything is free, including the podcast, episodes are available after airing on radio. The website is letradio.com. That's letradio.com, where free means free.
Return conversation with Dominic Thielmann on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Dominic is retired Romeoville, Illinois Police Department police officer. He was shot in the face, caused horrific damage. We are fortunate that he survived, and I sense that he realizes that as well. He was unable to return to police work. He's going through retirement process now, and he's a podcaster. The name of the show is Beyond the Dispatch Podcast. Do a Google search for Beyond the Dispatch Podcast, and you will find it. I wanted to direct your attention to a guest we had on the show. He's a retired police chief from somewhere in the suburbs of Illinois, of Chicago, Illinois. His name is Tom Weitzel. And Tom was shot early in his career by bad guys, and he was wearing a vest, and that's wound up saving his life. That he bought that vest. Him and his wife, they made the investment. This is back before a lot of departments issued them. And I want to clarify something with a lot of people. They are in the misconception that the vests work all the time. They don't. And they don't work all the time for canines. They don't work all the time for our human partners. And Dominic is a great case of headshots quite often can be fatal for police. So the fact that you can spend time talking about this, Dominic, is not lost on me. I want to go into change gears a little bit. So the doctor told you couldn't return to police work. And I'm sure, without being overly dramatic, this played a tremendous role on had a tremendous impact on you, your spouse, and your family life. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, so it was definitely devastating. You have hopes, you have dreams, like we spoke about earlier, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from you. And I remember the conversation I had with the doctor, and he's like, "Hey, just don't go on any roller coasters, and don't go see a chiropractor." And I'm like, "Well, doc, like how can I do my job if I can't go on a roller coaster?" I'm like, "What if I get into a pursuit and I crash or I get into an accident?" And he's like, "Well, you could have a stroke and die." And then I was like, "Well, doc, if I'm fighting with a suspect and they cut off the left side, or they try to choke me and they cut off the left side, what will happen? The left side of my neck." And he's like, "You'll have a stroke, or you can possibly die." And I'm like, "Doc, like how can I go back to work?" And he's like, "Well, you can't." So it was a gut punch, and I just felt that like a pit in my stomach, and my whole life looked like it was crumbling before my eyes. And I had to have a sit down talk with my wife, and she had to, talk some sense into me, because I was still like, I'm going back. Like, I don't care. And what really kind of sealed it for me was the thought of my family, and that I already had a close call. So how can I leave my son? My son has Down syndrome. So how can I leave my son left alone, unattended? I know my wife will always be there for him, but there's no love like a father's love, your biologic father. So it broke me, because in a sense, I also remembered my partner. If he gets hurt, I'm gonna feel responsible that I wasn't there to protect him. He has kids, or anyone on the street. So I started really beating myself up, and I really went to a depression in a sense. And thank God that I was going to therapy once a week, because she definitely helped me through that. My wife helped me through it, and my whole family. It still to this day, it puts that pit in my stomach.
And I understand all that 100%. And this goes back to another conversation I had with someone else. And for a long time, I had that survivor's guilt, for lack of better words. And I felt unduly responsible for other people. And I had to realize, and maybe this is a question for you. What I tell myself all the time when it starts occurring, because it does pop up, when I least expect it, when I least want it, is that I'm not God, I'm not Superman. I just did the best I could with what I had at the time. Right.
Agreed, 100%. And you're always going to Monday night quarterback yourself over the actions you take. And I did that for the longest time for the call. I played the scenario over and over and over in my head over and again, and I just kept breaking myself down. But I had to come to my senses, and that I was saved for a reason, and maybe that reason being is there's a new chapter in my life. Maybe I'm meant for something different. Maybe I accomplished what I was supposed to do in law enforcement. I had a great career, and in a short time, I helped lots of people in a short time, and that really kind of gives you that good feeling inside of accomplishment, and maybe I can take what I learned from this whole situation and teach other people, and hopefully that's my new path and my next chapter.
And how are you today? Not physically, how are you today mentally and emotionally?
Well, it's a big question for sure.
That's a loaded question. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I can kind of describe it to you as, that old saying of you take, don't give up, keep pushing and keep grinding, of you take one step back and, one day you're going to take two steps. You're going to take one step forward and you're going to take two steps back, but just keep taking that step forward, because eventually you're going to be taking 3 steps, 4 steps. And then you're going to be speed walking, then you're going to be jogging, then you're going to be sprinting. I feel like I'm still in that take 4 steps forward, 5 back. But I keep building on what I've learned through this, and therapy has definitely helped me. I just experienced my first panic attack 2 months ago.
By the way, I hate that phrase. I get it, but I hate that phrase, because I don't really panic. I get extreme anxiety, and it's a fight or flight syndrome kicking off.
Yes, and it brings me back to the night of me being shot, where you have that, you feel like your heart's going to stop. You feel like you're going to die. I feel like I'm going to black out at any minute, and I'm just shaking, and my whole body's tense, and I just keep breathing. And my wife is definitely phenomenal, and she keeps me calm, and she gets me refocused and focused on my breathing. There's so many techniques that she helps me out with, and also with therapy. So, yeah, panic attacks, they're definitely no joke. I actually had one just last night before the show, and I woke up this morning, and I was still, I felt like I was hungover, like I was drinking, and I don't even really drink anymore. So, and I didn't even drink yesterday. So, this whole morning leading up to this interview, I was extremely anxious and had the residuals from my panic attack. And you hear people talk about it before you actually experience it yourself. You're like, oh, stop being a baby. But it's actually a legitimate thing, and it's scary, because you actually feel like you're dying.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I've gotten to the point where, and my wife, Stephanie, I call her the boss. I met her years after retiring from police work. She knows how to handle it. When I get that way, we accept it as part of the territory, that it comes with doing this job. I've got to transition in, because we're almost out of time. You got into podcasting, Beyond the Dispatch podcast. Was there a reason why you wanted to do this?
Yeah, and it actually is near and dear to my heart. I had been approached. One of my really good buddies wanted me to do public speaking, and I think at the time I just wasn't ready for it.
I think you're ready for it now. By the way, you're only
Right.
speaking to about 48 million people. You're doing pretty good.
I appreciate it.
No
Definitely have
pressure.
a lot of self-doubt. Yeah, right, exactly. So, yeah, and I was at the gym one day, and I got home, and it just clicked in my mind of I still want to be a part of law enforcement. I still want to give back to the community. And I call my childhood friend, Carrie, and he's a firefighter, and he's actually medically retiring too, and he's actually going through the whole process. And I call him. I was like, Carrie, listen to me. I know I'm going to sound like I'm out of my mind, but I have an idea, and I think it's a good one. I was like, we should start a podcast. We can have on first responders, military members, anyone who usually associates doctors, lawyers, therapists, and we can give the side of these career paths that people don't see, the human side of it, because cops are normal. We're just normal people.
Right.
We put our pants on one leg at a time. So I wanted people to see that, and then I also wanted to give off that message of mental health is a huge portion for me. I lost my best friend back in 2019 to suicide. And the crazy thing is,
we could talk about that forever. It is a huge problem with our police and our military.
Absolutely. So the crazy thing is, actually, the day I was shot, it was the 24th was the day, and then we went into the night at midnight, so it was the 25th. That was actually my best friend's birthday that I got shot on, and I was wearing his T-shirt that his parents had given me. He's a big Baltimore Ravens fan, so I know.
We got something in common. I'm a Ravens fan. Of course, I'm a retired from the Baltimore Police Department. Dominic, we're just about out of time. Where can people find your podcast?
You can find us on we're on Instagram, you can find our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Amazon. I believe YouTube Music has it. We're on all the major platforms. If you're looking for our social media accounts, we're on Instagram, Facebook, X, or Twitter, whatever people are calling it nowadays, TikTok. We're on all those platforms.
All right, Dominic, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you to all the listeners. I hope you guys learned something here.
You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. This was a podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. Back in just a few days, another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.